Morning, folks. Welcome to another study in the 10th commandment. We are thinking about this commandment we find in Exodus 20 and verse 17, where God says, "You shall not covet your neighbour's house, nor his wife, his servants, his ox, his donkey, or anything that is your neighbour's." So this commandment seems to focus in on specific things that we're not to covet. For example, there are some commentators who see in the reference here to not coveting the neighbour's house a reference to anything that speaks of security in life, because in those days, obviously, if you had a house, it was somewhere where you could live and not give you shelter and so on. Then the mention of wife, we're not to be covetous in respect of a person's marriage, and there's many applications of that. The fact that they are married, who they're married to, what their marriage is like, and it's so easy to be jealous of things that we see in other people's marriages. He then goes on and he talks about servants, and of course if a person had servants, it meant that they were able to live a reasonably leisurely life, and it's very easy to look at others and see that they don't have to work as hard as us, for example, in order to make ends meet. And then there's mention of the animals, and the animals was a status symbol of being fairly well off, and so some commentators believe it's a reference to wealth that other people possess, and how often we can so easily be guilty of coveting the finances that some people have accrued compared to the little that we have in comparison. So we can be covetous of other people's security, we can be covetous of their marriage, we can covetous of their wealth, we can covetous of their more leisurely lifestyle, and so on. But the commandment goes further than that. We're told we're not to covet anything that is your neighbour's. In the Bible, there are a number of passages that show us how covetousness led to disaster in people's lives. Ahab coveted Naboth's vineyard. It was only a small piece of land that Ahab as king wanted, and he already owned hundreds of acres, but the point is he wasn't satisfied with what he had. He wanted what Naboth had, and he wanted it so badly that he was prepared to do anything in order to get it, even, as it turned out, put Naboth to death. David, he coveted his neighbour's wife, literally. He saw Bathsheba bathing naked one evening, and his covetous desires were aroused to such an extent that he was prepared to do whatever he needed to do in order to satisfy those desires. So there's somebody coveting something that someone owned. There's David coveting his next door neighbour's wife. And then Achan, we have an example of him coveting possessions, coveting wealth. You remember how he saw the beautiful designer clothes in a house in Jericho, and there was also gold and silver, and having seen it, he wanted it for himself, and he took the steps necessary in order to secure them for himself. This command forbids us from coveting anything that belongs to someone else, or for craving for ourselves that which God has either forbidden us to have, or in his providence has withheld from us. Now there's practical applications of this. We can so easily be jealous of other people in the church, jealous of different aspects of their lives. We can look at their marriage and say, I wish I had a husband like that. He's kept his good looks over the years. He's so loving towards his wife. He's great with the kids. And it's very easy to want what someone else has. We see a family who are able to go away on foreign holidays, a couple of times a year, and we think to ourselves, there's us, all we can afford is a few days down in Portrush. And it's so easy to end up being covetous. Friends, covetousness is like a cancer. It eats away at you, and it is something that God has forbidden, something that is sinful. And I'm sure that every single one of us, if we sat and thought about it, would have to admit that this is a sin that we have committed over and over again. The good news, of course, is that like all sin, it can be forgiven as we come humbly and sincerely confessing it to God, telling Him, Lord, I am jealous of so-and-so's marriage, of so-and-so's circumstances in life. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't be like this, I know, but I'm feeling these things. Please forgive me. Not only that, it is also possible not only to be forgiven, but to get victory over this particular sin. God will give us grace, and the more we find our contentment in God rather than in things or in circumstances, the less we will covet what other people have. Let us fix our thoughts upon God. Let us concentrate our desires upon God. Let us make God the thing that brings us contentment in our lives, and all covetous desires will be subdued. May God help us and be with us throughout the rest of this day. Have a good day, folks.